Okay, this is the second tutorial in this series that I'm putting out for the Blender Game Engine Python programming tutorial. You should be familiar with Python programming, and if not, uh, one of the ways to do it, you can watch my Python programming tutorials that I did for Blender Render. And even though that's BPY dot stuff versus BGE type stuff, it's still Python programming, and a lot of it still applies. What's different is that the commands in here are different than the commands within Blender Render. So for instance, in Blender Render things start with BPY versus in here things are BGE, and in the last lesson we positioned a cube with this local position dot command. Well, that's not the way you do it within Blender Python, but you can check out that set of tutorials if you're not familiar with Python, because I won't be teaching Python so much in here as I will just how to use the game engine, and we'll do a little bit of Python, but most of the Python code programming is taught in that series. And let's see, so let's just keep going in here. Now notice in this last lesson, see this line here, the scene? I said the scene is equal to bge.logic.getCurrentScene. Well, we didn't use anything that used scene in here. See, I used cube object up here, but I didn't use scene. So really we didn't need that command. So if you want to comment something, that you just put a pound sign right at the front of it, turns it green. So that really didn't apply. Alright, so now if I want to, let's do something else. It is, I just come down here, backspace to there, and up, moves that over. I got to make sure that this if statement is right on here. Now if you're not familiar with if statements, but though you should be from the other Python, make sure you terminate it with a colon at the end of the line, and then this gets indented by a tab, and then the location. So this could just have also been .z or input. There's also you could use kx input active, and there's another one called kx input just activated, but we'll just use this for now. Let's see, we want to do something else. Let's go grab some spare code that I have in the other file right here. There's a force. Where is it? Right here. These are great events. Alright, so but now instead of using this like this, I'm going to copy some code and paste it right into here. I don't need this extra line now, like this. Get rid of that line. And instead now I have another command called apply rotation. But of course the name is not player, it is cube object. Like that. And then let's put another something in the scene. Let's put a let's add a cylinder to the scene. We'll give it a color. Like that. Maybe we're going to rotate this on the x-axis. Alright, so we're going to do a couple things. And we're going to take care of this little command right here. So I'll show you what it does. So this is also, we'll try this with the down arrow key. So now down arrow key. And now we say if the down arrow key is pressed, and we're still within this main function. This is all basically, sometimes I'll do this. I'll put a line that says end of main function, or you could say end of main method, like that. And then I know that all this stuff is within main. So when main is running, it's saying it's looking for the up arrow key, it's looking for the down arrow key. In this case it says an apply rotation, and notice this format. It basically puts X, Y, and Z rotation values in square brackets, and then there's a comma, and then true. And true is for local, and I'll show you what that is. That is, well, you should be completely familiar with that from all my other lessons. That's for the local axis. So you're rotating on the local axis instead of the global axis. So let's try it. We'll try it in a couple cases, but let's also copy this. I'll show you how. There's a couple ways to do it. One, we could actually go get this object within the scene, but sometimes what I'll do is, just to keep it, just so you see, we're just keeping it simple from the beginning, I'll call this file cube object, and it's associated with this cube object. Alright, and then I'm going to go copy this whole thing. I don't need to do this because there's a way you can go get this object, this cylinder, by name, but we won't do that yet. So sometimes what I'll do is I'll create another file, and maybe I want everything associated with the cylinder object to do its own thing. And so here I'll just paste all that same code. And then the name of this controller owner, instead, I'm going to change it up here to keep it consistent, cylinder object. And then this is going to be cylinder object, and that is cylinder object. And then what's the other thing? We're just practicing. And then what's the other thing we need to do? Yes, we need to go into the logic brick for that as well. We'll zoom in. I press Control up arrow key. We add an always sensor. Press that, make sure it's depressed. We add Python controller, and we get that Python code called cylinder object there, and we make sure it's connected. Okay, then we go back up, and then back into the scripting mode. Okay, so now this cylinder object is associated with this code called cylinder object, and this is associated with this code called, you pick it over here, cube object, like that. Alright, so in one case, this one is going to move the cube by 1 and rotate it. Let's just make this a much smaller number in case I press that keyboard too many times, 0.01, like that. And then notice this rotation value. This is a pretty small rotation value. You have to remember rotation values here. We'll get to, but typically we work in radians instead of degrees. That's what a lot of the math commands are written in, or is in radians. And if you're not familiar with radians, you should definitely go check out my video on YouTube, and you could just type in, just like it's called, just what is a radian. Alright, and that way you get that down to a science. And because it's just another angle of measure like degrees, but that video will definitely clear it up, because I'll use radians all the time. And so we're rotating this if the down arrow key is pressed, and then in the cylinder routine we'll do the same thing. We'll do this on Z. We'll do for Z, we'll raise it up by a small amount, 0.01, like that, and we'll also rotate it by a small amount. Alright, so let's go over here and run our code and see what happens. Alright, that one's falling to the ground, and notice that the cylinder didn't fall because, well, let me stop that for a minute, because we didn't set that as a rigid body in the first place. It's just set, oops, got to be back in game engine. It's still set by default static. Alright, so it's not going to move here. Alright, so I press P. Alright, so now when I press the up arrow key, the cube should move a little bit, and it should also rotate a little bit. Let's see. Oh no, oh, I got them both wrong. How about the down arrow key? That's the up arrow key. Alright, so that's moving up. We can't tell if that cylinder is rotating because I've rotated it on cylinder object. Let's rotate it on Y. And then let me see what I goofed up in the cube object code. I said up arrow key and right arrow key. Did I get it wrong? Cube object. There's in the cube object, so it's the down arrow key. That also has the down arrow key and associated with that, and the cylinder has the up arrow key, apply rotation. Okay, should be working, but I didn't see it. Okay, let's see. Let's try it again. Alright, so the up arrow key, it's moving it up. Is it rotating it? Alright, let's try. Let's maybe just can't see it. So let's just comment that out real quick. And we'll give it a greater rotation. Alright, let's see here now what happens for the cylinder. Okay, there goes the cylinder rotating like that. So I guess I wasn't giving it enough rotation. And then the cube will do the same thing to that. and we'll make that 0.5. I copied this from some other code, but it would maybe my tank and alien code, and oh, maybe that was for when I was moving the turrets on the tank, and I was moving it in really small angles that I copied in for some reason. I forget. That was some time ago. So then, and we'll just move this barely, like that. Okay. So now we press P. Now they should both be going. Oh, so we commented up and then down. Oh, the cube. I think the cube is probably getting. The cube must be interfering with the ground here. So let's just turn this into a static object just for a second until I deal with it. For again, all right, let's do it again. Down. Now the cube is working. I mean, the cylinder is rotating. Why is the cube not working? You know how it goes, right? It's always programmer error. So what did I do wrong? So this is in the cube object. Cube object. I call a cube object that's associated with that. And unless I accidentally, let's see, game logic for the cube. It's called cube object. Oh, I had the pulse set wrong in here for some reason. I must have gone in and was goofing around with it. Okay, back to the scripting window. Now, when I press it, there they go on the down arrow key like that. Alright, so yeah, I was in there goofing around earlier. Forgot to set that pulse back on there. Alright, so there they go. Alright, well, so that should give you an idea. So now you have two commands to play with, right? And that's on the local axis. If let's just do one thing, let's just change. See, since this is rotating on Z on the local axis, let's see what the local axis is doing. Let's see, local is local there, so it's rotating it on Z like that. Let's just press P and let's see if it's rotating like that. But if I was to do this one thing real quick and just say false, E like this, then it should rotate it on the global axis. So we'd have to look at the global axis. Now Z is pointing up. Now when we run their thing, and there you see it's rotating that way. Alright, so that makes a huge difference to your code. Alright, well that's it for this lesson, and I'll see you in the next lesson.